So Marvel keeps trying to literally kill God in their stories, and Christians are celebrating and cheering for it. If you're familiar with what's happening in the cinematic universe of Marvel, there's new movie trailers coming out about a new villain named Victor Von Doom. And a lot of this is being presented at the release date of the movie, for example, as Doomsday. They're bringing in all of their top list, A-list actors back into the fold to promote and push out this brand new movie. Now, when I saw the movie, there was a couple things that stood out to me in the trailer, and we'll probably get into that as well. But it reminds me of this idea that Marvel has been pushing with most, if not all of their villains for a very long time, that they want to kill God. Now, before I get everyone jumping all over me in the comments, we are attacking an idol here, and I think an idol for many people, which is superheroes, which is Marvel, right? It's genuinely an idol for a lot of people. So as we dive into this, if you are a Christian, give me some time to walk through why I think this is the case, and try to restrain yourself in your comments till at least the halfway point as we dive a little bit more into this, because it is very valid. I think the scripture is clear, and we can see how Marvel has been trying to do this over and over and over. Now, for this movie trailer, this movie coming out, Doomsday, I'm going to do a whole separate video on that. But instead, I want to focus on an example that we see most recently that happened, which is a very prominent example of this, which is Thanos. Now, in particular, the reason I want to focus on Thanos and not some of the more recent villains is because Thanos, the way that he was kind of built up, in many respects could have been the end of Marvel's movies at that time. But it culminated over several films to get to the point where he was presented as the main villain. And a lot of the things that he said and did and stated were his goals mimicked or looked strikingly similar to the God of the Bible and his character. So let's go through each one of those. And I think it'll be really valuable, again, if you are a Christian, to know what you've been watching, how you've been consuming it, and maybe contrast that with the information that I'm about to present. So from the very beginning of the film, when we're introduced to Thanos, we see teasers of him in previous films. When it's stated what does he ultimately want to do is to destroy half the universe and then be grateful, take his rest and be grateful. A couple of things that stand out to me right off the bat is that when we look at the universe or the world from a biblical lens, we know that God has one intention, which is to save the righteous and destroy the wicked. In the book of Revelation, at the very end of it, we see that this is the case. God will return to earth with his righteous people, and the universe, more than half of the universe in some respect, will be destroyed. The wicked will be destroyed once and for all. Now, if we think about the plans in parallel, and also think about how Thanos frames most of his plan, it's usually from the context of mercy, wanting to give those who are surviving a better chance. So again, first and foremost, what is Thanos' goal? To destroy half the universe, to restore peace and balance. What is God's goal? To destroy the wicked and save the righteous, which again, more than half of the universe from that perspective would be destroyed. Another example that we see from this is how his soldiers actually refer to him and talk about him. Most prominently, we have someone who comes to the forefront at the beginning of the movie Infinity War named Maw. Now, Thanos actually calls him the Maw, which is interesting because the Maw means like a voracious throat of an animal or a greedy mouth, right? So interesting how it's kind of the mouthpiece of Thanos, if you will. But look at what he says right when we're essentially introduced to this character as the movie starts. Hear me and rejoice. You have had the special privilege of being saved by the great Titan. You may think this is suffering. No, it is salvation. The universe scales tips towards balance because of your sacrifice. Smile, for even in death you have become children of Thanos. There's a lot of things to unpack from there, but if you're a Christian and you're hearing me read this, there should be some things that jump out to you right away. Maybe in a film setting, in a movie theater, it feels a little different, but this is verbatim what was said. So let's go through this. First thing that he calls out is that the people that are about to die are actually going to be saved. Their suffering is actually their salvation. Now, there's many scriptures, and I'll put some on the screen, that talk about how the suffering of a Christian leads to salvation, or how the suffering in this life can't be compared with the eternal joys of those things to come. Very eerie sort of language here. And notice how he starts it. He says, hear me and rejoice. Now earlier, just a second ago, I said the Maw, kind of referring to the mouthpiece of Thanos. This sounds like a prophet in the Bible. This sounds like a prophet speaking to the people of Israel, or speaking to Christians today, to hear the voice of God as I speak it, or as I speak on behalf of God. I would almost go so far as to say that Ma in many respects has a parallel to some level with John the Baptist, who is kind of carving the way for God to come, or for Jesus to come rather, kind of carving the way for Thanos to come. So we see this, that you're about to be saved, you're going to experience salvation. Salvation only comes from God. We know that from a Christian context. And the last sort of key piece here is that even in death, your sacrifice, what you're sacrificing, Christians are called to sacrifice for God, of course, and we do that because of what he's done for us, what he sacrificed for us. Those who are about to die are called children of Thanos. He specifically says, you will become children of Thanos. Again, from a Christian context, I'll throw some scriptures on the screen here. This is language that we know, to become children of God, to become brethren with Jesus Christ. This is a terminology and language that we should be familiar with, and that should make a lot of sense to us when we really think about what's being said here. Now, when we look at the film's context and, obviously the mission, what's driving it, some of the dialogue in between, there's a lot of examples, but a few that I think are the most prominent to me. One is that the ship that Thanos is seen in throughout all of the films, the one that is accompanying him wherever he goes, his dwelling place where he lives, is called the Sanctuary 2. Now, Sanctuary, of course, in the Old Testament and even in the New Testament, if you look in the book of Hebrews, is where God dwells. God dwells in his sanctuary. We see so many examples of this, and the sanctuary, in many respects, is a central theme all throughout the Bible, whether in the Old Testament or the New Testament. The idea that Jesus Christ is our high priest and dwells in the sanctuary. He goes into the sanctuary on our behalf. This is, again, one of those things that, if you read it in context, seems a bit odd or, again, strikingly similar to the character, the nature of God. In the movie Infinity War, again, as we kind of, if you've seen the film, one of the things that he has to do in order to get one of these powerful stones, the Soul Stone, in fact, is he has to sacrifice one of his children. In this case, he goes to that place with Gamora, and then he has to sacrifice Gamora. Now, I won't get into Gamora, even the fact that her name is Gamora, Sodom and Gomorrah, kind of an interesting parallel there as well. But the fact that Thanos has to sacrifice his child, and in the film, this villain, this evil person who's going to destroy half the universe, actually feels a lot of remorse. He feels very sad. Gamora even says, "There's nothing that you've loved," and in fact, it was her. And then she is killed. She is sacrificed. Interesting. If we look even at the gospel summarized in John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever should believe in him should not perish, but have eternal life. Again, in order to accomplish his plan, he has to sacrifice one that he loves. He has to sacrifice his child. And in many respects, he has many children, but obviously Gamora, even in the lore behind like her and her sister and some of the other folks, it's his love, his most beloved daughter that he has to sacrifice in order to accomplish his plan. Now, as a Christian, when we're kind of laying all of these things out, there's an element of like, okay, well, how much was pulled thematically from one thing or another, or how much is informed maybe because the writers are Christian and they're pulling all these different things. I'm not saying that anyone is doing this intentionally, but this theme that we see in Marvel is repeated over and over and over. The end of the world is coming as we know it. Humanity has to fight against it to stop it and to delay it. And in that context, what are they trying to delay? They're trying to delay the judgment of Christ. They're trying to delay the second coming and judgment that comes along with it. The last sort of piece that really drives this home, I feel, is that whenever you see these things come to fruition or these attacks happen at the end of Endgame, where does Thanos come from? Where do these villains always seem to come from? Even in Ultron, where do they come from? They always come from the sky. And in Endgame, we see that again when he comes in with Sanctuary 2, which is a dwelling place, with his army. He has a massive army, and they start destroying and attacking. I believe it's Wakanda is where this kind of tees off, but they start attacking the earth. I'm reminded of the second coming of Christ, when he'll return with his angelic host, take us with him, and then when he comes again to cleanse the earth, that's exactly what will happen. Fire will come from heaven, consume the earth, consume the wicked, and purify the earth so that it could be remade new again. So again, if that little parallel with everything else hasn't convinced you that Marvel is trying to paint this scenario where humanity has to take its stand against this deity, this power coming from the sky, doesn't eerily or strikingly convince you that Marvel's attempting to kill off God and rewrite the future as we know it, I think we really have to sit with that a little bit. There's a million examples that I could pull from. not only from Thanos, but from all of the other films as well, where we see this consistently, this theme and this sort of idea that the villain has characteristics of God, but they've been perverted. And the heroes who supposedly have characteristics of God actually carry characteristics of Antichrist or Satan. And maybe I'll get into another video about that, but for this video, I really wanted to hone in on this idea of Thanos. I also wanted to hone in on what's coming up for this next film, which I'm going to do a video about Doomsday. So again, as Christians, we have to be honest here. What I've described mirrors God's character. It mirrors the story that's told in the Bible, albeit with some nuance, because of course this is storytelling. With all of that being said, we're seeing this mimicked, and we're seeing how Marvel is teeing it up. This destruction, this end of the world, this end of humanity is always paired with humanity rebelling and fighting against it, which we know this end will always come. Last little tidbit here. The scriptures, God returning, that's guaranteed. I have no doubt in my mind, and the scriptures are clear. Thanos repeats consistently that he is inevitable. He is an inevitable event that will happen in the course of history. And in fact, if we look at what God says, is God inevitable? Is his outcome and judgment inevitable? Absolutely. So another thing that kind of stuck out in my mind. So what's the problem? What's the problem with this FLF? Why should this matter? Why should I care? I'm just watching it. It's just entertainment. The reality is that I'm not the first person to notice this. And even just doing a quick Google search, I was able to find some Reddit threads and other Christians talking about how Thanos is merciful, how he has all of these characteristics, like how he's doing this because he's actually benevolent. He's not malevolent. This is not me actually bringing a brand new idea to the forefront. This is an idea that's existed for a while. But the reason that it's important is because when we see these films, we want the villain to lose. Like when I see it, I want the villain to lose. I don't want Thanos to defeat all of the superheroes, right? Like, or any of these. I don't want those things to happen. And what that has done, I think for me, in many respects, it's started to posture my heart, and I think much of the world's heart, against this idea of a coming judgment where we'll be held accountable for either righteousness or wickedness. And if we're not in Christ, we will be destroyed. There's something scary about that idea, and I think with films like this, we're able to put that idea off, put it away, and kind of make it so we can rewrite the history that's going to be inevitable. Our heart becomes postured against God. When we talk about God destroying the wicked, or when we talk about God's judgment, people will paint him as being a malevolent entity. They'll say, God is evil because of XYZ, when in reality, he couldn't be farther from that. He is the embodiment of love. But these films and these storytelling, when we see them and we consume them, our heart posture begins to change pretty dramatically. And I think as Christians, we should be mindful of what we consume. The eye is the window to the soul, and we know for a fact that the more we consume, whether that be entertainment, pornography, whatever else it's going to be, will affect our heart, our mind, and our relationship with Christ. So with that being said, I hope this is a blessing to you. I hope that you're able to walk away with some sort of insight. Even if you disagree with me, let me know in the comments. We can have a dialogue. But at the end of the day, this isn't about just one film, one idea, but more so a theme that we're seeing. And as we see more and more of a buildup towards this next film, it's going to be a similar sort of thing, a similar sort of characteristic where Marvel again tries to kill God. But God bless. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've been blessed. Be sure to like, comment, share, all that good stuff. This is FLF, and let's continue to light up Babylon. God bless.